Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another session of the Blockchain Economy Summit 2021. In today's session, we'll be covering blockchain and the capital markets and global trends. We have a very exciting speaker panel for you with people from all over the world. We have with us Aziz Bin Zainuddin, who's with me as a Chief Product Officer at Fasset. And coming from Singapore, we have Ashequr Rahman, Managing Director of Midway Securities Limited, Atique-E-Rabbani, Managing Director of the Computers Limited, Sulmaan Hanif, Chief Revenue Officer at Fasset as well, Julian Weber, CEO of Selise and consultant at the Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission, and Mr. Syed Javed Noor, Deputy Managing Director at IDLC Finance. And finally, from Indonesia, we have Sajid Rahman, General Partner of MyAsiaVC. So welcome everybody. I'm Misha Ali, Director at Fasset, and I will be moderating this panel today. So I'd just like to go around and hear a little bit from each of you, introductions from each of you. So Sajid Bhai, why don't we start with you? Can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Misha. So my background has been in banking and finance, so I guess somewhat related to the session today. So I used to run Standard Chartered Bank across markets. Last was Indonesia, where I'm based now. But I moved from banking. I now run a global health business as well as invest technology companies through a fund with a specific focus in fintech.
Thank you. Aziz, why don't you go next?
Hey everyone, my name is Aziz. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Fasset. So I've been in the tech space, startup space since as far as I can remember. Prior to Fasset, basically I founded and sold my own crypto media firm, which was acquired by a US media firm. And even before that, I was basically a financial analyst at a tech startup based in Singapore.
Thanks for that introduction.
Thank you.
Ashequr, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Ashequr Rahman. I'm the Managing Director of Midway Securities Limited. We are an equity brokerage firm here in the Dhaka Stock Exchange, one of the mid to larger brokerages. We deal with mainly equities and bonds here in Bangladesh. As many of you might know, with Bangladesh capital markets, there are only limited products. With this blockchain, we are hoping that we can start to introduce new products into the industry as well. As a background, I worked mainly in the US in Sylvan Investments and then in TD Ameritrade, which was at one point the second largest brokerage in the US, recently bought out by Charles Schwab.
Great, thanks. Atik Bhai, you're next, please.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Right. My name is Atique-E-Rabbani. Well, I'm a chartered accountant, but I've also been in this industry, IT industry, for over 35 years in the UK and in Bangladesh. I mean, my company is pretty old. I've been evangelizing blockchain since 2017. I've been starting with building awareness in CNAG office, in Ministry of Finance, Ministry of ICT, all the professional bodies like chartered accountants and FRC and others and multinationals. I'm a passionate believer that, we in Bangladesh have to embrace this before anyone else. I mean, we don't have to follow anyone to our succor. So, I'm really excited to be in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Atik Bhai. Julian, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
My name is Julian Weber. I'm in the tech space since, also pretty much since I can think. I have also a business in Bangladesh since 10 years now. I came to Bangladesh in 2010 for the very first time. Ever since I developed software globally. We have a team of 400 plus engineers across 2 continents, Asia and Europe. Originally, I'm Swiss, and yeah, since I'm in the tech space, obviously I'm also involved in blockchain. I think from the early days already. Not commercially, I must say. As of yet, we do a lot of innovation projects, a lot of POCs. I've been following Bitcoin really from the very beginning, then went into Ethereum when Ethereum started. The Ethereum founders community was, I actually hosted the Ethereum founder community in Switzerland at our offices. That was back in, I think, 2014, 15, something like that. Now I'm consulting BSEC, Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission, and that's, I think, also the reason why I'm here today, to talk to you about the opportunities for Bangladesh in the space of blockchain and crypto. So yeah, welcome everybody, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here, Julian. Thanks so much. Sulmaan, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you very much. Apologies for the slight technical issue on my end.
Go ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. First of all, very lovely to meet you all through this fantastic summit. So thanks, Misha, for putting on such a great event. And thank you to our sponsors and partners. So my name is Sulmaan Hanif. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Fasset. For the last decade or so, I've spent time in technology and consulting, predominantly at organizations such as Gartner, before my time at Fasset. And also at The Economist, where I was involved in some public policy consulting in the realm of technology and blockchain. So my role at Fasset is looking at international expansion. I've been very keenly watching the progressive nature of the different stakeholders in the Bangladeshi government to look to embrace blockchain and other relevant technologies. And just very excited to be speaking today on this panel and hopefully learning from you all and also adding in my 2 cents.
Thanks for that, Sulmaan. And finally, we have a late addition to our panel, Mr. Syed Javed Noor, who's the Deputy Managing Director. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Javed Noor. I work as Deputy Managing Director at IDLC. In my portfolio, I manage housing, finance, treasury, and strategy part of IDLC. Along with recently, I've been also appointed as the investment committee chairman at IDLC. I'm also a partner at IDLC Venture Capital Fund. So thanks for inviting me, Misha, and looking forward to a fantastic session.
Thank you. So let's just get started. So I'll just start off with our first discussion topic for the day. So in response to the need for a modern capital market in Bangladesh that combines benefits of public equity, private equity, and corporate bond financing with traditional bank credit, we saw in December of last year, 2020, the first Sukuk product launched in the country. Now, I would ask the panel, and specifically anyone who wants to speak, Javed Bhai, maybe you, what is the future of Sukuk in Bangladesh, do you feel, and how can technology play a part in that?
Thanks, Misha. Thanks for the question. We are a Muslim majority nation. And if you look at the Islamic banking has a disproportionate customer base when you look at the number of Islamic banks versus the number of customers that they manage. We really didn't, before introducing Sukuk, we really didn't have any sort of the way I would say, other than the equity instrument, we didn't have any income securities in the country. So yes, this is new, and I see if there are few Sukuks can be introduced into the country, then probably it has a bright future. And specifically, when I look at Sukuk, the opportunities are we have large infrastructure projects which are happening now, the Podda Bridge and the metro rails. Probably part of this has already been funded by the external lenders. We can channel our resources from the general people in the form of believe in infrastructure, we believe in the income stream that has the potential to generate. This is a great future.
Thank you. Sajid Bhai, would you like to add anything about your feeling about the launch of Sukuks in Bangladesh and the future for this?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Regarding the Sukuk launch recently in December, any thoughts on the future of Sukuks in Bangladesh?
I think, I was part of the team which, launched Islamic banking in Bangladesh, and we thought it would be a big, banking operation, but it took time. I mean, obviously we have Islamic Bank, which is one of the largest bank, but other than that, other Islamic banking that has been by different banks has relatively limited. And I think the main reason has been the lack of products in that space and the lack of credibility. So Sukuk bond, I think, clearly established that, because this is a very advanced product where based on the sentiments of a large population of the country. And I think for the large infrastructure projects, Sukuk bond would be very helpful. So I'm very bullish on that. I'm not sure about the success of the bond that was launched by IDLCs or underwritten by IDLCs, but I assume it would be strong. And what we have seen in similar markets in Malaysia or Indonesia, Sukuk bond are really very large outcomes, usually very successful.
Great, thanks. Aziz, you're a scholar in Islamic finance. How will technology or tokenization, which is a subject that we've covered a lot in the past couple of days in many sessions, how do you think tokenization is going to play a role in Sukuk financing going forward?
Thanks, Misha. But I wouldn't go as far to say that I'm a scholar of Islamic finance. I studied Islamic finance for 4 years, and I'm very passionate about Islamic finance, as well converging that with new technologies, in this case, blockchain technology. So if we look at the developments of blockchain technology implemented or use cases, usually in the proof of concept level with governments, you see that most is around, for example, shares, right? Equity. Now, when we take a look at Sukuk and why there's such a big opportunity is that just on a high level, right? Islamic finance is generally less efficient than conventional finance, purely because there's so much contracts or other, for example, agreements that you have to inbuild into the arrangement so that it becomes, for example, halal. But you have buy and sell back, lease, ijara, those kind of concepts that, traditionally would make Islamic finance more, requires a lot more resources in structuring as compared to conventional finance. So right there and then you can see that level of, for example, inefficiencies could, with blockchain is all about alleviating inefficiencies through the use of a shared ledger or smart contracts, the evolution of blockchain, right? So you can see that Sukuk has, given the pain points that we see in Sukuk, given for example, the illiquidity that we have in secondary market, right? Obviously, because of the fact that it's such a small supply relative to conventional bonds, and at the same time, the nature of, as in institutions that usually hold Sukuk up till the entire tenure, makes it inefficient in terms of price discovery. So all those pain points within the capital markets infrastructure that would allow for these the alleviation of major pain points, I would say it holds a lot of potential when we talk about how blockchain can be used in the Sukuk space.
Great. Does anyone have anything else to add about Sukuk before we move on? Any comments?
Can I just make a point? Well, I think Islamic finance and blockchain has something in common. Consensus. So I think it's a great fit, and of course, Bangladesh suffers from management issues in the capital market, maybe the governance issues. So of course, technology can help, but it cannot help in isolation. It has to help in a concert. So the concert is the key to be successful. with Sukuk or other issuance of things and other instruments, ETFs or what. So I think technology has to be embraced in the right spirit and in the right combination. It cannot be looked upon as a solution in itself. So I think that's the attitude, that's the understanding, that's the realization we have to kind of build into our society, into our top levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashequr, I know you wanted to say something about this before we move on.
Just wanted to add that because this is the first product coming into the Dhaka Stock Exchange, and as I introduced myself, I said that there are practically two products that we work on in the Dhaka Stock Exchange, which is equities and mostly bonds. And we have a lot of government treasury bonds, but they're very illiquid, doesn't trade a lot. And there are only two corporate bonds, which are also not trading a lot. So it's mainly more equity focused. So from a brokerage point of view, we are extremely excited to see a new product coming in and the scale that it's coming in. Because you basically need one product to come in, and hopefully it's successful and it's launched, you'll start to have a lot of Sukuk products coming in and maybe more corporate bonds coming in. Recently, the BSEC has approved a lot of perpetual bonds, and they've also mandated that 10% of that perpetual bond needs to be floated in the Dhaka Stock Exchange. Now, what does that do? That gives regular investors who do not have a lot of money to actually invest in bonds. They can only invest in FDR, in banks, on Shante Patro from the government. So if they wanted to look for less risky investments, they could turn into Dhaka Stock Exchange with very limited amount of capital to go ahead and invest. So in our opinion, having that sort of liquidity, having that sort of access really helps, and we are always trying to see how we can diversify our portfolio. And I think with Sukuk, it's something that we should see more coming in forward, and that should include to the overall liquidity and investment opportunities for people in Bangladesh.
Great, thanks, Asheq. So in yesterday's opening session, I'll move on to the next topic. We heard from the chairman of BSEC about innovation within the public equities market, which we're talking about right now. When we look at the US, we have, and other countries such as Canada, we have crypto-based ETFs coming, which are gaining traction. In the US, we have the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Now, Julian, this question, let's start with you. Do you think there's an appetite for ETFs or as well as crypto ETFs from a retail perspective or an institutional perspective in Bangladesh? And what is the BSEC's view on crypto-based ETFs specifically?
All right. Well, I think there's definitely a very big appetite for these kind of investments or these instruments on the Bangladesh market. We see that not only locally, but also when we talk to foreign investors who want to place their capital in Bangladesh for a longer period of time. They're looking for these kind of instruments. Now, when you say crypto-based ETF, it's I think there's a long way to actually have a crypto-based ETFs, because first we need to have tokenized assets or even tokens. And to have tokens in Bangladesh, it means there's a lot of regulatory change from many different regulatory bodies to actually make this possible. There has been talks going on about central bank, maybe allowing some sort of tokenization or some sort of tokens to be traded, but this is all like just in a very early stage of discussion. The main elephant in the room, obviously, is that you cannot trade the Bangladeshi taka against foreign currency, and I think it also holds a lot of investors back, and that also stops innovation in the area of securities, right? Like, and when you say ETFs in general, ETFs, like really, like generically speaking, ETFs, like the typical old school ETFs, these are regulatorily possible now in Bangladesh, and I think there are different companies working on launching ETFs, basic ETFs, tracker certificates on certain industries, on certain indices, and this we will see. I'm pretty bullish on us seeing ETFs traded in Bangladesh within the next 3 years for sure.
Great. Sulmaan, in Pakistan, we noticed that ETFs, about 4 ETFs have been launched as of October of 2020. What is your thoughts on crypto-based ETFs or even ETFs for the Bangladeshi capital markets?
Yeah, thanks, Misha. I think some of the points that Julian made are very important. And if we look at the 4 equity ETFs that were launched on the Pakistan Stock Exchange last year, they generally had quite low trading volumes. And I think what technology has, and I think one of the speakers said this earlier, is that technology will be able to potentially lower the barriers to entry for traditional retail and institutional users to interact with these new capital market instruments in a way that wasn't possible before. So with regards to crypto ETFs and taking a step back in terms of just traditional Bitcoin or crypto exposure, we see so many institutions around the world offering crypto exposure to their client base. We've only just 2 days ago heard of Goldman Sachs now saying that Bitcoin is officially an investable asset class. And I think what's very interesting when I look at the regulatory stakeholders in Bangladesh is that there is a opportunity for the progressive minds there to think about, could they leapfrog from the traditional equity ETF to then looking to incorporate this new crypto ETF or or Bitcoin trusts that are now emerging around the world. So I would definitely echo what Julian said, that there is definitely appetite growing for people to get exposure in a safe and regulated manner. But I think the timing will be paramount, and also that kind of coordination between the different stakeholders.
Sajid, I would ask you to weigh in on this, because you live in Indonesia, and obviously I think there's a lot of development going on with cryptocurrencies there. What do you think about the possibility of crypto-based ETFs or other securities on capital markets in Bangladesh?
I personally think ETFs should be a priority. But if you look at the Bangladesh wealth management ecosystem from a retailer perspective, there is hardly anything. I mean, there is a set of government bonds where some people buy those bonds, and then there's really nothing other than just getting money in the savings account. On the other hand, there is not enough sophistication to really go out in the market and deal with stocks which are, sometimes open to different, influences. So I think proper ETF, which is well managed and with a strong basket of underlying assets, would be a very good vehicle for a lot of smaller retailers to put money savings, and that's what we see, right? I mean, in developed markets, even to the extent that from 401 to others, you can actually invest in ETF, which is usually very tax efficient in the longer term. So there's a very clear encouragement to put the savings for people into ETFs, and that's why I think ETF is sort of something which Bangladesh should consider, and people should actively look at one. On crypto-based ETF, of course, it of course depends on a lot of regulatory landscape changes that needs to happen. But again, then I think a crypto-based ETF is a better way to introduce rather than opening crypto exchanges, because that again is a much more limited exposure and would essentially be managed by people who actually understand space. Of course, the volatility in crypto is significantly higher than stocks. So it is very risky for retail investors to go in without knowing it. So assuming all the regulatory hurdles have been resolved, there's very clear transparency on how to go about it, then I think crypto-based ETF will probably make sense. The other thing that actually can be tried is a sandbox approach. I have seen countries using sandbox to really try it out in a limited scale, and I think that's something worth exploring.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Aziz, you want to weigh in on this as well before we move on?
Yeah, sure. When we talk about, for example, specifically on crypto-based ETF, right? You see that even in the US, there is no crypto-based ETF yet. Even in the US, there are as an established trust funds like Grayscale, which is one of the most popular ETFs, right? And even then, they operate on a trust structure. So, and as other panelists have said, so it's more on the regulatory limitations at this point of time to fully pass, for example, a full-on crypto-based ETF, which is, even in the US, that is currently pending under the SEC. So that need requires a lot of intervention first. And as other panelists have said about the sandbox approach, I think that's a very effective use case, because at that point of time, as the regulators can sort of understand the dynamics and mechanisms involving, for example, this new technology and the mechanisms in place from the traditional point of view as well as the new point of view, so that they can really understand the depth of context, right? And then once they understand more about that, they can analyze much better, and hopefully regulatory frameworks can be built around that. Yeah.
Great.
I think one thing I should probably mention, while it's quite exciting to talk about crypto-based ETFs, we should understand, just for everyone in general, the volatility in the Dhaka Stock Exchange is quite high, and the level of education for regular investors is very nascent, frankly speaking. And if you look into the volatility in crypto in the international markets right now, if we are really serious about introducing that in this country, I can assure you, I think regulators are really going to think long and hard before they can approve anything. Obviously, we are all for innovation and whatnot, but I think it's a very risky venture to really think about launching any crypto-based ETF anytime soon in Bangladesh. We haven't even launched an ETF in general yet. What I would say that there is definitely a huge appetite for ETFs in Bangladesh, because if anyone knows into the history of the capital market, the mutual funds have been quite underperformers here in Bangladesh. And there has been various reasons for that. It's the trust of fund managers that's constantly being in question, and governance as well. We feel from the from the stock exchange's point of view that maybe ETFs could offer a more sane product that can show that investors who are coming into the stock market who do not know exactly which companies to buy in could just buy a general ETF. Even our whole index could be turned into an ETF, which would mitigate the risk of investing into the stock market. So I think it's quite soon, within the next year or two, you would probably see Bangladesh launching a couple of ETFs. It would be the traditional kind. I think from there, we can probably start thinking about, okay, how do we do crypto-based ETFs?
Fair enough. Asheq and Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, my point is a general one on ETF, not Bangladesh crypto ETF. I mean, Bitcoin and, of course, Ethereum, these cryptocurrencies were meant to be, freedom from government control, freedom from centralized control, and freedom at large. I certainly agree that ETF will propel the popularity of such cryptocurrencies, but you should also consider the other side, that ETFs are bringing in government kind of impositions, government kind of influence on a currency which we thought was a freedom currency. So it's just a general point on the ETF or the such things which will represent Bitcoin and to popularize. So these two sides has to be kind of considered, I believe.
Thank you for that. Let's move on. Well, I want to ask one follow-up question to Asheq and Julian. You guys mentioned a timeline of 3 years, 1 year, 2 years. Do you think that, given what's going on and the speed at which things move globally, is that a timeline that seems a little too long, or what do you think the challenges will be of launching it sooner than just a normal ETF sooner than that?
Asheq Bhai, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, so back in 2017, the BSEC had launched a draft rule for exchange-traded fund rule in Bangladesh. Obviously, every year they tend to tweak on those rules. But see, we have had a new BSEC team coming in last year, right after the first lockdown was removed in Bangladesh. It was back in May of 2020. Now, this team, headed by Professor Shibli Rubaiyat, has been very, very transformative in our country, and they're trying to push the capital market onto new dimensions. See, Julian is part of that think tank who are working on trying to launch these ETFs. My understanding is the BSEC believes, at the very least, that we should really be pushing bonds first, because we already have bonds which are quite lucrative under the private placement markets, but not fully tradable in the general markets. I would imagine that right after we're done, making bonds a very popular item, we could probably be launching ETFs. From Dhaka Stock Exchange's point of view, I would say that speaking to all the directors and everyone, we really want to launch the ETF because it has direct correlation with being traded on the exchange itself. So we feel that at least from the exchange's point of view, there's an income source that we can really go forward by launching ETFs and getting in more investors being involved in the stock market. The more investors we get in, the more liquidity and the more stability we can have in this volatile market. So I think it's quite realistic to think that, in general, launching an ETF within the next year or two, I believe is very much realistic.
Great, thanks for that follow-up, Julian.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. I mean, technically, it's not that big of an issue to launch ETFs. There is also, I think the infrastructure is underway right now to have those ETFs ready with the central counterparty. That's a new organization that's introduced into the stock market very recently. So technically, I don't see big challenges. The challenge is really, it's a chicken egg thing, right? You can technically do ETFs, but then what's your underlying asset? So initially, the underlying assets will be those stocks that are currently listed at the exchange, and and that's quite a limited universe, right? So like when you look at these global ETFs, what they do is they combine securities from different exchanges, and like so when you say crypto-based ETF, for example, that means that there are some ETFs that are managed in such a way that they have access to the crypto markets directly. Now, that is something that I don't see coming in Bangladesh very soon, but we all have to work on this to obviously make it happen. I mean, I think it's very important. Now, there is a side show, sort of, that could be started, and that would be tokenized Bangladeshi assets. Right, so you could go and say that certain things, like for example, real estate, right? You could take a real estate company and give them a very clear focus, and then say, okay, this real estate company is like it's like a real estate fund. Their name is, I think, REIT. They call it REIT. So you could launch a REIT fund, and then you could say you tokenize this, and then. What does it mean, tokenize? So tokenize means that there's no benefit yet with the stock exchange when you have it tokenized. You need a token exchange for that to happen. So now you would set up sort of a parallel, you would have to set up a parallel exchange on which people could exchange these tokens with each other. And then that you could link back to maybe to the exchange. Or you could say that you run a separate parallel organization that tokenizes certain things and lets people buy them. That's how I see it at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, so a follow-up question here, which I think both Asheq and Julian. Asheq, you were also working on the small cap exchange, which is, I believe, about to launch or just launched. This would be another exchange in addition to the Dhaka Stock Exchange. It's like the small cap exchange. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience in launching the small cap exchange and how you think this kind of tokenized exchange would work?
So the small cap exchange is basically a different board in the Dhaka Stock Exchange. It's managed by the Dhaka Stock Exchange. We started working on this about 4 years ago. And we've been trying to launch that exchange for quite some time because we have a lot of SMEs who are unable to raise capital in Bangladesh that easily. Anyone who knows about Bangladesh, whenever you go into a bank to get a loan, the banks would ask you for assets, and obviously for an SME, that's a very, very difficult proposition. And because Bangladesh is a growing economy, we're going into a developing nation. It's quite important to give that sort of access to capital for small and medium enterprises. So what we've decided and what we've tried to work on for quite some time, and finally we've actually launched. And when I say launch, we've had the very first company, Nilako, going public. who raised about 7.5 crore funding recently, and our company Midway Securities Limited has also is also a shareholder by applying for that IPO. What we see, and hopefully we're able to launch it on the exchange soon, going public probably within the next 40 to 60 working days. What we see is we have a lot of SMEs and startups who are quite interested in getting listed in the SME board. Because to get listed in the SME board, they do not need to have, under our current rule, any regular company needs to have at least 3 years of operating profit. A lot of SMEs and startups would not have 3 years of operating profit. That's barely, they can show maybe 1 year of operating profit. So it's a lot easier for them to go ahead and be listed. And there's a huge appetite in our investment community with the high net worth individuals, with the eligible investors, with many mutual funds and private equity and venture capital who are willing to take a risk on all these SMEs. So we suspect we will start seeing a lot of SMEs being listed in the next year. I think there was an internal document in the Dhaka Stock Exchange that once we get the first company launched, we should expect to see at least 4 or 5 in year 1, and then you could probably start to see a lot of coupling effect and see maybe 15, 20 being launched in year 2 and moving forward. So we're very excited. We're very excited to see the launch, which we hope will happen within the next 60 days. And we are trying to advertise the SME board to a lot of enterprises who are willing to raise capital or who feel that, it's time for us or for our company to take it to the next level.
Sajid Bhai, as an early stage investor in many, many startups, how do you see this new development of the small cap exchange for Bangladesh, and what additional developments do you think are necessary to encourage, let's say, early stage startups or even mid stage startups to actually go to IPO? Because I from a conversation I've had with some startup founders here, a lot of them don't even want to go public. So any thoughts on that?
So, I think this is a very good step for two reasons. First of all, if you look at New York Stock Exchange, the biotech companies, which probably don't have any strong balance sheet or revenue, are allowed to go public because of the IP they develop. I don't know how strict our listing process is, but it requires a certain amount of cash flow turnover and stuff, which makes it very difficult for these experimental companies to raise money. So that's one. Second, of course, is our private sector investments in startups is very low. We don't even have to seize a fund. What we have is some seed stage fund, and that also, you can pretty much name them in your finger, right? 2, 3 funds there. And also not the way that this is not happening in many of those cases. So clearly, there's a big need to encourage the startups to raise cash flows at some stage. So I think this is sort of like a SME or something equal to AIMS in UK. So that model would really help. So I think that's good. And the other thing, I think it somewhat encourages because one of the things I see for a lot of SMEs and later stage startups is they really struggle to raise funds, and they don't want to dilute more the founders, because in some cases they take too much money, so very high dilution. So sort of listing will help in reducing the dilution. One point of caution, though, is I know that, if I recall correctly, there will be limitations on who can actually trade on those stocks, right? So it can be retail investors, but has to have some sort of, applications proper or something like that to actually understand the risk. So I think that needs to be clearly monitored, because the risk is very, very high. We talked about the volatility in the actual stock market. So I'm assuming in the stock market, so people really need to understand. So that's one. And of course, the companies that get listed. We have a lot of startups or a lot of companies which really don't have very strong, underlying balance sheet or product and stuff like that. So how they get selected is very critical. But I think it's a big question. The one other point, Misha, you're referring to, I think, so the secure STO, right? The secure token that is now based on assets or, like properties and others. So I think that can be a big role to play within the regulatory framework of Bangladesh, because that way you are essentially, it's backed by very strong assets with a proper cash flow, and then it get exchanged within a network without with the money keeping within the system, right? So I think there can be an option to explore that information.
Great. Javed Bhai, you've been having some internet problems. Is there anything you'd like to weigh in on this small cap exchange?
I would say, yes, I had issues and apologies for that. That's a great initiative. When we invest in the companies out of our VC fund, the question comes out, what are the sources or how we can exit. This small cap board, at least in paper, has offered an option. As Mr. Afiq, if I'm right, the Midway Securities MD suggested that probably there will be few within this year, and if it gets momentum, there will be a lot more. The only thing that I'm slightly bit cautious of is about the quality of the financials that is being prepared out here. So here we need to do something so that the eligible investors can trust these numbers. This is something we need to work hard.
Okay. So we've had a comment up here on the screen for a little while, and I think I'd like to pose it to you. So a lot of people are talking about incidents while trading on mobile and web platforms on the Dhaka Stock Exchange. So blockchain technology is obviously a good solution to these kinds of issues. So what's your take on that? Is the capital market infrastructure ready to adopt blockchain?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, the adoption of blockchain technology has to be, as I mentioned earlier, has to be in concert with the management of the capital market itself. So naturally, he's talking about, mobile and web platform, issues which are pretty real, I think. So, of course, but, we can actually take blockchain technology as a kind of a catalyst to improve our, overall governance. I think that's it's like having a foreign consultant when you do not, listen to your local consultant. So the foreign consultant says the same thing, but, that puts an added pressure on the organization to move and change. So I think, for the capital market itself, there is a very good chairman now. So I think, they should really try and adopt technology, making it ready for the technology itself so that people get benefit. And of course, this kind of suspicions and comments and, will be there, but we have to do something to overcome these. So I think it should be adopted, but with the right framework in place, right governance in place.
Okay, thank you. Julian, any thoughts on adopting blockchain technology into the capital markets? Not crypto, but just the technology itself.
Yeah, so I think you see this also internationally on the adoption of blockchain in stock markets. One aspect is regulation, like we have heard and discussed. The other aspect is technology. So technology-wise, I strongly would always opt for setting up a new exchange, like a sort of, technology-wise, a crypto exchange, which works a little different than the current stock exchange, right? So you have a lot of things are automated, but a lot of things are also out of control. Like what was mentioned earlier, the people who run the exchange, they have to really let go. Like if you say I'm going to like we hear it in Japan, Switzerland also has a project, Swiss digital exchange. The regulator has to absolutely let go of a lot of things and leave them up to the market. So, for example, people will be on this exchange and they will trade. There will be inherent short selling. You see that in decentral finance, for example. People will simply borrow from another one, borrow shares from another one and then sell them. and then give them back to this other person. You cannot control this, right? If you really want to have you can control it, but if you go and control it, you will again put like limitations in terms of technology into these different steps, and then you have to ask yourself, does it really make sense? There are a few aspects like central depository, for example. You could put that on a ledger. You could say, okay, we're going to create a ledger where all the brokers will check in the stocks of their account holders with their BO number. And but then you only solve one little aspect. Scalability itself is not really. I mean, the problem with the mobile app. I also face this. I'm also investing in the stock exchange for quite some time now, and with different instruments, and also I'm also doing the mobile trading, and yes, it is obviously an issue, but that can be solved with technology by itself. I mean, technology is there to scale. You see, there's a very big discussion now going on in the global crypto world with moving away from mining, typical mining of the security of the ledgers, right? So you don't have miners anymore, but then you have stakers who basically put in, who lock up some of their coins in order to then run the security protocols, and then you have voting among them. There's new concepts coming up, but crypto by itself also struggles with scalability. It becomes very expensive if you just do it like a traditional, if you just run a traditional, I would say version 2 blockchain. So my point would be to launch a new thing, run it in parallel to what is there right now, figure out a few of the securities that you want to trade, make sure that the brokers, like Asheq, when they sign up clients, or when clients will go there, they sign a document that says in very, very big letters, you can lose all your money here, and you agree that you will be willing to potentially lose all your money. And then, yeah, I mean, the smaller the asset, the bigger the risk, but also the bigger the reward, right? So I think that's an avenue, and that's like a leapfrog that Bangladesh can really do. Indonesia has shown this. I mean, in Indonesia, the exchange, the crypto exchange has more monetary value that is being traded than the actual stock exchange in Indonesia. So yeah, I mean, it's possible, and Bangladesh has this huge chance. Even when I speak to other people from other exchanges or other capital markets, what they're saying, Bangladesh has a very good setup right now, with this separation of concern with the exchanges, and then the central counterparty and the central depository, which are separate companies, separate organizations. That's actually a very good outset to go in and then say, okay, now we, allow such an exchange. But obviously, it also comes with big investments. I mean, someone has to put the money on the table to actually do it.
Great. Aziz, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experiences with the scalability of blockchain technologies and what you think the limitations or the opportunities may be?
Excellent point, because the thing is, right now, when you talk about scalability or throughput, or basically the amount of transactions that a blockchain can handle, you look at public blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and you compare it with a traditional centralized databases like Visa, MasterCard, as in public blockchains are very, very slow. So that's why in the great context of discussion about how blockchain can be implemented in capital markets, or for example, in a stock exchange, we have to carve out the parameters that we want to establish first, right? If we say, for example, right now, as we know, there's a rise in decentralized exchanges, and decentralized exchanges, the most popular being on Ethereum blockchain, is extremely expensive and it's relatively inefficient, right? Now, how about we look at private blockchain solutions by Corda R3, things like that, where it requires a consortium effort within in the industry to test out the solutions and get the sign-in of stakeholders, of those relevant stakeholders within the, for example, the stock market industry. right? So that's why it is very important for us to establish the parameters of which we can test out blockchain. And you can see that in DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation in the US, right? They have been exploring blockchain solutions for the past 3 years. They have launched 2 concepts, right, on blockchain. And their work, the parameters of their concepts is purely based on post-trade processing, clearing and settlement. And that's where they, as I said earlier, right, when you talk about clearing and settlement of securities, right, there's a lot of inefficiencies, like Julian said, about having brokers, having custodians, having CSDs, having clearinghouse, all those risks in between, counterparty risk. Now that is where, if we establish the parameters that we want to test out, or explore the concepts of how blockchain can work within that setting, then it is very important for us to really understand how those can be implemented, and looking at all those case studies where, for example, DTCC or even the FCA in the UK, where they have clearly stated that they see public blockchains as an independent registrar. So all these developments from a regulatory point of view is very promising to explore blockchain technology, but within the context of the current traditional systems in place, so as not to, rock the boat too much.
Awesome, thanks for those comments. Anyone else before we move on?
I just want to add to this part, because I was planning on bringing this forward. If we were to see from our exchange's point of view that, what could be the implementation, or what could blockchain bring to, current stock market in Bangladesh, I think it has less to do with trading and more to do with post-trade settlements. Because in Bangladesh, and also in many other countries as well, the settlement is basically T+2, and in some areas it's T+3. The lower settlement cycle we can bring forward in terms of shares and money and whatnot, we will start to see a lot more participation, a lot more liquidity coming into the market. I believe blockchain is probably a very good technology that we can explore to see whether in Bangladesh we are able to do post-trade settlements much faster. Once again, the other issue being that while it is quite possible for us to tokenize maybe securities, it is also very difficult for us in Bangladesh to tokenize money. So I think if we were to really go for it, maybe some sort of stable coin would probably be used. And in conjunction with smart contracts, we could still have blockchain modules coming in. The nodes could be separated out between different brokers and the exchange itself. And then each node would go ahead and verify the settlement right after 2:30 p.m. in Dhaka when the trade stopped. So I think post-trade settlement is probably the thing we will look into. One thing I would like to mention, the viewer asked why facing trouble with the mobile app and the desktop trading. It has less to do with the technology itself. It has more to do with the fact that Bangladesh, and probably we're the only exchange, and maybe Indonesia, where the exchange is hosting the trading platform, the centralized order management system for all the brokers. And there are about 250 brokers here in Dhaka Stock Exchange, and all their clients go onto the exchange going into one single order management system. That is a huge problem, because if you look into the US, you look into any other developed nation, none of the exchanges give the order management system directly to the investors. The exchange just has a does the order execution. And it's the brokers who have their own order management system. Now, the BSEC has been asking us to bring in our own OMS recently. I think Julian is working on trying to bring out a bigger scale OMS for all the brokers, which in a more affordable manner. But some of the bigger brokers who have already signed up for the API for the Dhaka Stock Exchange. So we suspect that once different brokers will start to have their own technology, their own order management system, all this bottlenecking with the current app and the current slowness, I think you'll start to see them dissipate.
Interesting. So Sulmaan, I think we've been talking about a company in Pakistan, and in Pakistan, I think this is already there. The different brokerages also already have their order management systems. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there, and then maybe we can move to parallel in Bangladesh?
Yeah, so I think the conversation you and I were having recently was around technology enabling the average user to kind of take part in the public equities markets when it comes to likes of apps like Robinhood in America. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for technology to play a role and disrupt the current landscape in Bangladesh, and play a role in the financial inclusion mandates of Digital Bangladesh and all the great things that we've heard over the last couple of days. And I think if we look at technology specifically, I think financial literacy is obviously high on the agenda for everybody in Bangladesh, both the government stakeholders and also the private sector. And I think even going as far as some of the topics, I'm just thinking about things such as tokenization that people have been talking about. There's definitely another area for technology to play a role in maybe appealing to non-resident Bangladeshis who want to find a way to easily invest back into Bangladesh. And that's where we see a lot of new applications of blockchain potentially playing a role in actually creating a new fund flow for money to come back into the country. So it's going to be very interesting to see how countries such as Bangladesh and neighboring Pakistan and other areas and countries in Southeast Asia kind of embrace this technology, as we've discussed.
So let's talk about Robinhood for a second, because I think that's an interesting point you brought up. It can be said that Robinhood has brought trading to the average person who may not have been involved in it before. Do you think, Ashiq, I know you've worked at TD Ameritrade, which is a very similar concept there. Do you think that Bangladesh is ready for that level of inclusion into the capital markets, like an app like Robinhood, for example?
Well, an app like Robinhood would do what? It would make it easier for you to sign up to become an investor. It wouldn't cost you anything, apart from the equity that capital that you put up. Sure, we can go into that, but see, once again, we have very limited products to offer our clients. Now, when you're doing that in the US, you have multiple products and trillions of dollars of market cap. In Bangladesh, we've only got roughly about 336 listed companies. Out of them, probably investable, frankly speaking, are maybe 50 at most. We've got corporate bonds, which are not traded that much. So when you're really trying to bring investors on board, why haven't investors really come in, the general people who really can invest with any amount in the Dhaka Stock Exchange? Why haven't they come aboard in the last 10 years? And it wasn't really lack of access to technology. It was more that the product isn't there. The market is not attractive enough for you to come. Bangladesh has been enjoying a steady, fantastic economic growth, GDP growth for the last 6-7 years at the very least. But apart from this year, the last 5 years for the Dhaka Stock Exchange has been extremely volatile. As anyone coming in, you would really need to know that, okay, I'm investing for the long term, maybe a 5 to 10 year horizon, and no need to look into the stock market every day. You couldn't go to sleep, knowing that, okay, I've invested a lot of my hard-earned savings into the stock market. You just couldn't. So I think even if we were to bring in this technology, yes, you can get a lot of people coming on board, but then you miss out on these people having basic financial literacy, which is mostly available for, let's say, the people in the US who are signing up for Robinhood, but you wouldn't have that in Bangladesh. So I think going forward, we can start to roll out this technology, make a Bangladesh Robinhood and whatnot. Midway could make something like that. I could bring in zero commissions. Obviously, that wouldn't work. Trust me. There is literally only one avenue of income for us as a broker, and that is our commission, and that's it. Whereas in the US, you payment for order flow, you've got floats, you've got money management fees and whatnot. We only have one. So if I go to zero, I'm going out of business very soon. So I would say we need to really basically start educating our investor class to say that, hey, come into the stock market, but know that it's risky. We need to start bringing in more big IPOs. We've got some fantastic companies here in Bangladesh which are not going public, right? Let's forget about even startups. Let's just talk about Standard Chartered Bank. It's listed in Nepal. It's not listed in Bangladesh. You've got Nestle. You've got so many companies that we can try to, incentivize them to say, come, be a listed company. When Robi came in last year in January, we saw about 300,000 new investors signing up in that month. Our company, Midway Securities, signed up 10% of all that. 10% of all the new people who came into the stock market, we signed them up as our clients. So, whenever you bring the product, you bring the investable assets to them, I feel like, then we started adding technology, making it easier access for them. You would start to see an explosion in the stock market and a lot of people participating.
Great. I think the way you're describing the Bangladesh stock market sounds a lot like the crypto market with all of the volatility. One of the things you mentioned is that, a lack of products that are available and there are a lot of good companies out there. And Sajid Bhai, I'm looking at you. Why are companies not willing to do IPOs here at the rate that they are, let's say, outside in other countries? What is the barrier to going public?
I think there are two things. It's a bit of like chicken and egg, the depth of the market. So you're just giving an example of Standard Chartered or Nestle's of the world, right? So, I mean, as someone who works in Standard, most companies, the global companies, don't want to list in more than 1-2 markets, right? So Standard is listed in HK and FTSE, right? So they don't want, unless they're basically forced to do it, so they would like to avoid that because of governance reasons. And then, of course, if you want to start listing in each of every company, Standard is present, I think, in 50 countries, then it's a governance nightmare from a central point of view. Then, of course, the question is that what is the depth of the market and how much they are actually going to raise locally. So one is just listing for the sake of listing, and then another is there has to be very strong business to do that. So I think that's the one. But of course, the depth is somewhat dependent on how many people if on the question of Robinhood. I was not Robinhood, but I think companies like Public or Stash, which has a big additional element besides the direct trading. So that would be a proper analogy for in case of Monday. And so I think as those technology evolves, those options come up. I provide more and more retail investors and more corporate investors will come in and do that. Even if you look at the balance sheet management of the corporates, it's very limited. We are seeing companies like Tesla and others are now starting allocating some of those in BTCs. Apples and others have not done it, but they will do it at some stage. But in Bangladesh, if you are a CFO in a large corporate, how do you manage your treasury? You essentially put your money in a fixed deposit in a bank, and then lend it out and then earn it. Or also for the large corporates, there needs to be a way to better manage the treasury and earn that. And I think that's all. There's no one before other. This all needs to happen, and hopefully over a 5 years horizon, we'll have a better ecosystem.
Javed Bhai, your thoughts on how we can encourage more of our local companies to, go public or join the capital markets?
Okay, I've been I was in the lending business for some time now. I'm into capital market. So the biggest worry for any private limited companies to go into public is basically the cost of compliance.
Okay. Hello? I think we lost Javed Bhai. I think, okay, in the interest.
Sorry, I was having internet issues from where I am now. So that is something that the cost of compliance, that is something which worries them. While I would echo Sajid Bhai's view that the large companies like Standard Chartered can be listed in 50 different jurisdictions that they are operating just because the cost of compliance is pretty high. So here in Bangladesh, if we can allow the companies to list some of their products, it's not only the equity, if they can list the debt products, is the cost of listing and the transactions can be brought down. I would echo Ashiq's view is that probably the investors will have a lot of option, and for the treasury managers, if the debt instruments have liquidity, immediate liquidity, or the deposit instruments that they put in their money, if there are if you can ensure liquidity through listing, probably the participation will be higher because a lot of us don't have really the appetite for equity.
Okay, thank you. So in the interest of time, I'd just like to get some final thoughts from each of you. Atique-E, why don't we start with you? Give us your final thoughts on today's session.
Right, of course.
Looks like we just lost him. So Julian, since you're smiling, you can go next.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well. First of all, I think it's fantastic. Congratulations to you guys to arrange this and to make you know, the whole topic of cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance more known in Bangladesh and push for it. And I think there's great scope to participate in it and to build something. From the BSEC side, I can just echo what has been said. BSEC is very progressive and very open for new things. The new team at BSEC is very strong, and it's also exciting to work there and to support them. Yeah, I see a bright future in this, but some action has to follow the words, obviously, and I hope you guys can make it happen, and you can bring investors, bring companies, and yeah, I'm of course also willing to help and support different kinds of projects. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for the offer, Julian. Atique-E, please, back to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, in Bangladesh, BSEC and other organizations, I mean, they must build in the technology capability. I mean, we have to have, you know, people who understand the technology, who can actually apply the technology. Of course, we will have to, you know, collaborate with our foreign partners, but, you know, so that building in expertise, and that has to be a general thing. The universities have to introduce, you know, courses like so. I think it's a holistic thing that we have to go and enter. I mean, it's not that simply BSEC, you know, being very progressive can actually make a change. Is the governance issue, is the whole Bangladesh issue. So I think the government and the banking sector, the capital market sector, and of course, you know, blockchain is a community thing. Blockchain does not work in isolation. So the biggest challenge in Bangladesh is to bring the governance structure, how to coordinate, how to make people come together, how to make the stakeholders come together. If you look at the stock market, how do you actually, you know, disintermediation, of course, you know, transaction delays, ousting and all that, which is good. But how do you bring in all the stakeholders? It will not be a public block, it will be a permission chain. So how do you have coordination and policies such that, you know, you work in unison? So that is the biggest challenge that Bangladesh has. So building in the technology, understanding, awareness, and also readiness to accept this technology through our community building and, you know, the stakeholder community building. Thank you.
Thank you. Aziz, over to you.
I think it's, thank you, everyone, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. And I think discourses like this is very important in order to help, you know, to get all the industry stakeholders together as well as the government in one room to actually discuss about the merits as well as the weaknesses, you know, so that we can really be very transparent about how this can play out and basically the next steps. So based on this discussion and, you know, potentially future discussions could be the milestones or the roadmap for further exploration. And I think it's very also equally very important for us, for everyone to understand the bifurcation between cryptocurrencies as well as blockchain, the underlying technology. And understanding those would be really helpful, that bifurcation, to really understand the parameters that we can execute, as well as the sequential roadmap that could be in place, either from a collaboration from the private companies or private stakeholders, as well as the government, to really understand how we can work together to make to go forward. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Javed Bhai, any closing thoughts from your side?
No, thanks. I mean, thanks for organizing this. I think the reality is that blockchain is not going away. It's a big force to reckon with. You know, I read somewhere around 32 central banks are experimenting with their digital currency, CBDC. You know, because the upside is so much, right? I mean, in terms of reducing costs, in terms of transparency transactions, you know, I mean, so it's a huge force. The question is that how quickly we adapt ourselves and be ahead of the curve in terms of technology, in terms of understanding the risk, in terms of policies, supporting a very controlled expansion and acceptance of those technologies. So I think that's right. We need to be, and these sort of dialogues will probably help in going there.
Great, thank you so much, Sajid Bhai. Javed Bhai, what about yourself?
I would say this sort of session will definitely help for us to, I would say, get ourselves educated and be on the same board. And we have a fantastic BSEC team now. I would say they have done a lot of things in the last few, I would say just a year that they are in, and probably this sort of opinion, the opinion from here, I'm sure will pass on in some point in time to the BSEC chairman, and hopefully looking forward to something better.
Thank you so much. And Ashiq?
So Misha, thank you, and you and your team in Fasset for organizing about blockchain. Obviously, first, and people in Bangladesh, those who are watching, this is a great way for them to learn about the technology. I wouldn't really speak a lot about crypto because I think for what happens in Bangladesh, in my experience, while there is private sector innovation, especially for anything to do with the capital markets, it's quite important for us to really work with the regulators first. Once it gets approved by the regulators, then you can start having innovation. So I would say, at least from a blockchain's point of view, working with the BSEC, Ministry of Finance, and Bangladesh Bank is extremely crucial. And I know that you have had a lot of those senior members in your last sessions. So I think that's a very good thing because we get the conversation going, we get the ball rolling. The BSEC team, at least from my capital market point of view, is a fantastic team. We've started to see our stock market, really go up in turnover and volume. Everyone focuses on the index. We personally don't really focus on the index. We focus on the transaction, how many people are actually transacting their capital in the stock market. I think, going forward, we should really focus on what we can do to bring the settlement period down in our capital markets. And I think blockchain could offer a solution. I won't say that it is the only solution, but it could definitely offer a solution. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I know that there's a few members over here in your panel who I know quite well. I'll be speaking to them, from the days going forward and to see, what can we do to bring maybe at least bring blockchain forward. So at least we can bring the trade settlement down and bring in more participation in the capital markets.
Thank you, Ashiq. And final thoughts from Fasset, Sulmaan?
No, thank you very much, Misha. And I just want to say it's been an honor and a privilege to be speaking with such decorated individuals on the panel today. And I think the summit has definitely pushed the needle forward with regards to getting the stakeholders around in one virtual table to discuss how does blockchain and how can blockchain be applicable to the various industries in Bangladesh. I think yesterday's session was very interesting for me to hear on the opening panel some very influential stakeholders say how blockchain, there's a national blockchain strategy that's obviously being championed by, I think it was Bollock Bhai who mentioned this. I think my 2 cents would be that this is a fantastic opportunity to understand and educate and also raise awareness around this technology and how it can disrupt both, retail users' interactions with capital markets in a safe and measured approach. And I'm very excited to see how all the stakeholders take a research-based kind of approach to creating that strategy and how Bangladesh will embrace it. So thank you, Misha, to you and your team and the inspiring Bangladesh team to put this event on.
Great. Well, once again, thank you to all the panelists. Thanks for being here. It was a really energetic and exciting discussion. I hope to see each of you in the future in person at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.